Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us at the California Forum on Ethnic Studies in Public Schools. Tonight, we have a very special presentation where we are going to hear from students, parents, school board members, and professionals about the challenge of ethnic studies in public schools. And lately, it's become a hot topic. I want to make a few housekeeping notes. Number one, there are many organizations and co-sponsors who are part of this event. I'm hearing an echo there. There are many events, there are many organizations and co-sponsors to this event, and some of us have taken public positions on the current ethnic studies bill. So before we get started, I just want to say that anyone's position on a certain bill or policy does not necessarily reflect everybody's position on a bill or policy just because they've taken part in this forum. This forum is meant to be a public space for everybody who has been affected by ethnic studies to let their voice be heard and to share their experiences with the public officials who have the power and authority to shape these issues in our public schools throughout California. So again, this forum is for the participants, and even though Amy and I are hosting here as a team, this is really the participants' place, and we are happy and honored to give them time to share their experiences and their stories. One of the things that Amy and I have been very concerned about is the role of activist teachers in our classrooms. And in case people haven't seen, we'd like to play a little clip to highlight what we have found over the past few months. We'll share that now.
One of the things that was just mentioned by Lupe is, doing this work, getting involved in this struggle, you will be attacked. It's a matter of time. And I think that some of us who've been around. And so some of the things that we can do as teachers is to organize. We just have to be really intelligent on how we do that. We have to know we're under the microscope. We have to know that Zionists and others are going to try to catch us in any way that they can to get us into trouble. So I help the students to organize. We go to those actions, and a lot of us here that have been to those actions have brought our students. Now, so how do we do all of this without getting fired? That's the million-dollar question, right? And I don't know how in the hell we have not been fired yet, because I know for sure they have tried. But
so these are, for those watching and for those who haven't seen this, this is a group of activist teachers who are members of UTLA, United Teachers Los Angeles, who were taking part in not an ethnic studies forum, but a UTLA leadership conference just this past August 2023, or 2024 rather. So these are concerns that we have. These are things that we hope lawmakers and policymakers see and understand are happening in the real world. That's a 50-second clip of an hour-long session where teachers conspired and plotted on how to avoid the very laws that are being dealt with in Sacramento right now. So this is a very complex topic. Amy, I want to thank you, as always, for being a co-host and for helping tonight. We are going to go ahead and get started. Is there anything I've forgotten to mention that you know of?
Yes, people should know that this is being recorded so that it can be shared later on.
Great. And I also want to say, by the way, for the record, we did invite the entire legislature, the entire California legislature. Unfortunately, none of them, hardly any of them replied. There was a couple of responses. Very disappointingly, we made serious outreach to the Jewish caucus, and only Assemblymember Rebecca Bauer-Kahn replied. So thank you to Assemblymember Bauer-Kahn. We appreciate your interest, and we're sad you couldn't make it. And we're sad the other Jewish caucus members couldn't make it either. But we hope that you see this recording and see some of the challenges that we're facing in our California public schools. I am very happy to share, though, however, that without being too specific, we have had some serious interest in this event from our friends at the federal level and in various offices there, both on the legislative side and on the executive side. So we're happy to those partners as well, or those friends as well. Thank you for watching. All right, so first up, we are going to go ahead and get started and bring on our two professional speakers. Brandy Shufatinsky, thank you, welcome. And let's see, Sangeetha Shankar, thank you so much for joining us. And Brandy, I will give it over to you here. And there we go.
Thank you, Dylan. Thanks, Amy. And it's great to also be here with you, Sangeetha. I think I'll just jump in and get started. And okay, for the sake of time. So decades ago, before many of us were born, there was a battle being waged on college campuses. Students were becoming increasingly vocal about their wants and began demanding curricular changes that would see administrators capitulate to student demonstrations and begin academic departments in fields of study that were not previously offered. Ethnic studies is one such discipline. Ethnic studies activists did not hide their views or their pedagogy that was and still is based on the oppression binary. One group of folks, the good guys, according to the pedagogy, are the oppressed. The other group of folks, the bad guys, according to the pedagogy, are the oppressors. And I'm sure that many of you have heard this, especially in recent months, that ethnic studies relies on the oppressor versus oppressed framework. But I want to reiterate why this is so important in the fight against indoctrination in K-12 schools. Some of you may have heard me say this before, but it's worth repeating. The movement to mandate high school students take ethnic studies in order to graduate was a vehicle to get anti-Jewish and anti-American material into schools. There's a reason the same activists who lobbied elected officials to require ethnic studies are also the same folks who drafted the first version that was so filled with anti-Jewish bigotry that it was sent back to the drawing board multiple times. They're the same folks who've organized student walkouts for Hamas, and they're the same people who've been providing teacher training and curriculum development in districts across California and in other states. Many well-intentioned people, elected officials, classroom teachers, and administrators correctly recognized that there was room for improvement in what our kids are learning. Many felt that there were stories and experiences that hadn't been part of regular curriculum and they deserved to be. And I agree with those folks. American students should learn about Bridget Mason and Ellen Ochoa and Mazi Philippe. Unfortunately, those with bad intentions use their influence and the desire for students to have access to an education that is more representative of the pluralistic country where we all live in order to push something into schools that, as we've all experienced, has horrible consequences. I want to be clear. Ethnic studies is not the study of different ethnic groups. Ethnic studies is the study of oppression. And the rigid pedagogy that it relies on cannot be done away with using guardrails. Everyone who's been paying attention has witnessed how guardrails are outright ignored by activists who were hell-bent on sowing division and chaos in our school system. Guardrails serve as nothing better than putting lipstick on a pig and pretending that it's now a lady. In reaction to the horrific murder of George Floyd and the continuous tension between public safety and healthy communities, a lot of people wanted schools to be spaces for learning about history, race, and racism. Bad actors seized on the moment and presented ethnic studies as a cure-all for societal ills. Most elected officials are not educators. Most of them haven't set foot inside of a high school apart from parent-teacher conferences since they graduated. And frankly, many of them just do not understand what ethnic studies is as a discipline. And we all saw that with the multiple drafts, the lack of clarity over what should be taught and what should not, confusion over who should be considered an ethnic studies expert. Should the activists, who were clearly here with an agenda to teach kids to hate democracy, capitalism, and Jews, or should the parents who don't want our kids to be taught stereotypes as truth and encouraged to be bigots? Now, do most of us want our kids to learn about all communities and individuals who are part of our diverse and pluralistic country? Of course we do. Do we need ethnic studies to do that? No. Those of us who value diversity that isn't only skin deep, those of us who want to acknowledge the struggles that our forebears overcame, those of us who want future generations to have the tools necessary to move our country forward, making it a more perfect union, we know that there's a better way, And ethnic studies is not it. Instead, let's diversify our social studies and history curricula. Let's support schools in broadening their electives. Let's support teachers when they're spending their free time building lessons and searching for appropriate reading material for their students. School districts are being sued and investigated for violating the civil rights of students and teachers. Students are hiding their identity out of fear of being retaliated against. This has happened in our country before when Black folks would pass as white to avoid being targeted by racists. Now, are we really at a point when class mandates are taking us back to that time? Teachers have told Jewish students that they don't belong and that their experiences do not matter because of their ethno-religious identity. Are we really going to sit back and allow elected officials in our democracy require this type of teaching in public schools that our tax dollars fund? Do we want Black students taught that because of their very Blackness, they're weak, powerless, and oppressed with no chance of achieving their goals? Because that's what ethnic studies does. It institutionalizes hopelessness, and it normalizes anti-Jewish bigotry. It stifles dissenting voices. Berkeley Unified School District is one of the first school districts in the country to require ethnic studies. Their requirement went into effect in 1990. Berkeley should serve as one of the many cautionary tales of what happens when K-12 schools put activism above academics. Only 30% of Black students in Berkeley Unified are reading at the level of proficiency. This means that 70% of Black students in Berkeley Unified cannot read at grade level. Just for comparison's sake, the literacy rate for Black Americans in the 1920s was 23%. Imagine what it would be today if elected officials put their time, energy, and resources into something that could actually positively impact students rather than into this activist pet project. Thank you.
All right, Brandy, thank you so much. I appreciate your comments. And Sangeeta, we'll go to you next.
Namaste, Shalom, and happy Mahashivratri to all those who celebrate. I'm Sangeeta Shankar and serve as a California Regional Director for the Hindu American Foundation, or HAF. We are a 501c3 bipartisan nonprofit that educates and advocates for the rights and representation of Hindu Americans. Founded 22 years ago, we are the oldest and largest professional organization representing nearly 4 million Hindus in the US. As we speak right now, Hindus all over America are celebrating one of the most sacred Hindu festivals, and hence it's my absolute honor to represent them. I'm also very grateful to ICANN and all others for organizing this critical webinar. And also many thanks to the elected officials who are here to hear our concerns. Now, as a California Regional Director at HAF, I spearhead Hinduism 101 training in public schools and law enforcement agencies. Why, you may ask? Well, have you ever gone through life never acknowledged for who you truly are? Has your culture and faith been misconstrued and downplayed? Welcome to the Hindu American experience. We are belittled and grossly stereotyped, or even worse, never seen and mentioned. Our demographics, though, paint a completely different picture. Indian Americans account for nearly 2.65 to 3.6 million in the US. And here in California, 625,000 of the 1 million Indian Americans are Hindus. Did you know that California is home to the first Hindu temple in the US and now boasts nearly 150 temples? In short, Hindu Americans are a significant minority in California with a long, rich history of strengthening the California economy and society through our hard work, family life, community building, and education. Our Hindu spiritual traditions teach us that we can succeed and empower ourselves and others in our materialistic, religious, and spiritual lives. However, this very positive mindset is misconstrued and misrepresented in the mandated ethnic studies in California. Don't mistake us. We aren't against ethnic studies. It can be a fantastic opportunity for our children to learn about each other's struggles. Ethnic studies can also help remove the animosity that inaccurate materials create, as seen in California's social studies lessons on Hinduism, which project us purely in the framework of castes, of oppressors and oppressed. This leads to bullying and bias against our children in the classroom who experience awkwardness and social isolation due to their religious identity, as revealed by a survey that we at HAF conducted. This continues into adulthood, where we are discriminated against as racists, castes, and supremacists. California versus Hate's 2023 data revealed that amongst religiously motivated incidents of hate reported through the program hotline, 23.3% were anti Hindu, second only to anti Jewish hate at 36.9%. Ethnic studies, unfortunately, further this inaccurate or no representation of Hindu Americans. The model curriculum mentions Hindus just once. In the liberated curriculum, we come across as those who do not receive hate, are highly privileged, and hence essentially oppress other ethnicities and religions. Why? Two reasons. First, the liberated curriculum projects anyone with financial, political, or educational success as an oppressor. That's it. That puts our community front and square as oppressors. Second, in lesson plans in our school districts, India is projected as an oppressive regime where Hindus discriminate against minorities like Sikhs and Muslims, a highly dangerous and erroneous representation of our global Hindus, or rather, a misrepresentation of our global Hindus. This divides us into good and bad immigrants, thus marginalizing our contributions and dismantling our children from their Hindu identity. And none of this is easy for our parents. Over generations, Hindus have become fearful of authorities due to 800 plus years of colonization. And here in the US, they now have to fight authorities all over again for their just Hindu representation in schools so that their children don't turn against their Hindu heritage. Is this what we desire? A future America stripped of its identity, faith, and trust in its own family and community? No. So let's come together to empower our children, create pride and agency, and teach them to celebrate their ethnicities, not shun them. Let ethnic studies enable our kids to build a stronger, happier, and united California. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you so much, Sangeetha. And thank you both, Brandy and Sangeetha, for sharing your professional perspective on ethnic studies. Both of you provided, I think, a great framework for the rest of our conversation this evening. So next, we're going to move into our student and parent panel. So I will go ahead, and if you are on the parent-only panel, you should be logging in now as well. So we're going to go ahead and say goodnight. Thank you to Sangeetha and Brandy. Thank you so much. Great. We'll bring in the next panelists here. All right. All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. This is the student and parent panel. Thank you so much for being here with us and for sharing your perspectives on how ethnic studies has affected you and your families. So first up, we will have Ruben and Irene. We will put you up on stage first. Welcome. Go ahead. Take the stage.
I took ethnic studies 2 years before October 7th, so I did not have any experiences with anti-Semitism in that class. However, I had plenty of experience with it in other classes. In spring 2023, my 10th grade and now current history teacher had said there was a Palestinian state that Israel was illegally occupying, that it existed prior to 1948. I had corrected him on it, saying there had been multiple empires before Israel, including the Kingdom of Israel, but never a Palestinian state. He responded by saying that he could not give me a source right now, but told me to, quote, just know at one point there was an independent Palestinian state once. He still to this day has not updated me with any proof of this Palestinian state prior to 1948, nor corrected himself in front of any of the classes I had with him. Another problem arose from him when we had a do now at the beginning of the 2024 to 25 school year, which was on the question, is the world becoming more free or less free? One student had claimed that the world is becoming less free because Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. I had raised my hand and said in response, how is it genocide if more births had happened than deaths since the Israeli response to October 7th? The teacher defended him by saying, maybe it's a slow burn, like they're slowly doing it over time. I also had a math teacher who had put up a ceasefire now printed paper sign in November 2024. This sign also had trivialized the Holocaust by saying, never again means never again for anybody. And the backside said, white supremacy teaches that the comfort of some is more valuable than the rights of others, insinuating Israel, a country of mostly brown Middle Eastern Jews and Arabs who hold prominent roles in their government, is white supremacists. It was quickly followed by the 11th grade English teacher also putting one of the same exact things on her door. In addition, the math teacher would play songs off of his speaker in class. He one week started playing only Arabic songs, including one that talked about Palestine in Arabic. Teachers should be focused on fostering an environment for teaching students fundamental skills that they can use in their day-to-day lives, not political indoctrination. As a student, I find that the political indoctrination common in San Francisco schools and other liberal Western cities makes it harder to hold normal views that the Jewish community has, as well as views that were once normal until just a couple of years ago, without teachers treating me unfairly for it. I fear that the district's enabling of biased political views will lead to more anti-Semitism being normalized amongst students.
I first became aware of anti-Semitism at my children's schools after October 7th, 2023. Prior to that, they had never mentioned anything to me, and as a parent, you really can be unaware about what happens at school. After 10/7, my son began to tell me about anti-Israel graffiti in the school hallways and bathrooms. There was a mural in the hallway that had flags of different countries, and some students had covered the Israeli flag with the Palestinian flag. These students went unpunished, but when my son wrote "Death to Hamas" near the mural, we were notified that he had committed a hate crime, and no amount of discussion with the vice principal and principal would convince them otherwise. My son had been bullied and harassed by a group of students so severely that he took a different bus route home that added considerable time to his commute. One of these students, a Palestinian American, struck my child during math class. My son shoved him back, and the math teacher put both kids in for referral. When I met with the vice principal, she implied that she was doing us a favor by not formally punishing either child, because she said it was my son's word against the other student's word. When I reminded her of the background of how these students had been harassing my son and how we had discussed this the previous year, she denied knowing about the trouble my son had had with these students. After meeting with the vice principal about this issue, when my son returned to math class the next day, the teacher had posted ceasefire signs in his classroom. I could not allow my son to stay in class with an instructor who clearly did not value his educational experience. I, along with other parents, made phone calls and wrote letters to school administration to complain about the teachers unfairly inserting their political activism into the classroom and creating a hostile learning environment. It took a long time for teachers to comply with removing political materials from their classrooms, and administration said that due to privacy concerns for teachers, they could never say what disciplinary actions were taken. I find it hard to believe that any repercussions exist because nothing changes. I contacted the SFUSD superintendent's office, and no one with any authority ever returned my email or called back. The only advice I was given was to contact my son's school counselor about how to drop his math class. No concern was given to how my son was robbed of his math education by a teacher who prioritized his personal activism over teaching math. These experiences, along with other anti-Semitic incidents at my children's school, have made me extremely mistrustful of school staff. I feel alienated from the school community and no longer donate any time or money to these schools. Thank you.
All right, Ruben and Irene, thank you so much for your testimony. It's very powerful, and thank you for sharing it with our audience here tonight. Ava, are you ready? And I think your parents are with you as well, right? Did you have your, there you go.
Yep.
The signal is a little, looks like the signal might be a little tough on your end.
Can everybody hear?
The signal looks a little tough. Maybe can you guys check your signal and then we'll come back after the next speaker? Is that okay? Hopefully they heard us. All right. Niraj, do you mind if we? Okay, hold on a sec, guys. Technical difficulties. 1 second, guys. Okay. Niraj, do you mind going next?
Yeah, that works for me.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to go ahead and put your presentation up. 1 second. And just go ahead and give me a signal when you are when you're ready to go.
Okay, yeah. Hello, my name is Neeraj, and I'm a PAUSD junior and a Hindu American. Today, I'll be sharing my opinions regarding ethnic studies as a required class and how it indoctrinates people and creates division. I am not part of the pilot class right now, but I have read the curriculum provided by PAUSD. Next slide. Critical race theory, in a nutshell, is the idea that racism is still systemic. It is one of the largest political disagreements between the left and the right. Whether you support it or not, ethnic studies objectively pushes one political opinion in this conflict. I'm not advocating for the banishment of ethnic studies, but to make a class that's expected to take 6 hours per week that pushes a political opinion required is the definition of indoctrination. Why am I referring to ethnic studies as just opinion and not truth? After the withheld curriculum was finally released, I read it, only to find not a single piece of legislation to back up claims made about systemic oppression in our nation today. Facts such as how LGBTQ students are overrepresented in Ivy League schools, or how Indians and Nigerians are some of the most successful immigrant groups, are conveniently left out. Critical race theory is about the 1970s. Notice how that's not 2025. Ethnic studies is offered to freshmen who take world history, which is not a Eurocentric class, if I may add. World history offers a wide range of ideas, whereas ethnic studies promotes only one single aspect of scholarship. Required core classes should not focus on a niche viewpoint or topic. That's what electives are for. U.S. history is taught 2 years later, including the steps we took as a nation away from the actual systemic racism that was there. Ethnic studies indoctrinate students without teaching any of this necessary context. Without having learned the history comprehensively, students will not use their critical thinking to form their own ideas. They'll just accept the political opinion taught in ethnic studies at face value. That's indoctrination. Next slide. Ethnic studies also creates division between so-called students of power and marginalized students. This wheel of power is a tool used to create divisions where none exist. It teaches that some people, by just existing, are given an unfair and oppressive advantage over others. This creates immense division between people labeled as oppressed and privileged. Intersectionality, which is also taught, perpetuates this and extends this to all forms of social life. I do not want to be labeled as oppressive or undeserving for just being a heterosexual male. Who would have thought, decades after the Civil Rights Act, that people are still being judged by the color of their skin instead of the content of their character? If you didn't recognize that quote, it's from Martin Luther King Jr. Next slide. My parents, like many other Indian immigrants, did not come from a place of wealth and worked hard to give me a good education and a good life. The idea that they were given an unfair privilege undermines all of their hard work and degrades their success. Even when I learned about Indian history in school, for the little representation that we do get as a large part of the student body, our quote-unquote oppressiveness was disproportionately covered. In our Hindu faith and culture, we are taught values like hard work and improvement, which is something that I love. We have worked hard for our success, and again, we are painted as oppressors who had it all to begin with. Forcing students to take this one-dimensional political class is no different than forcing students to take classes such as theology or Bible classes. Neither are backed by evidence, but still force viewpoints upon students. Historical racism is already a topic covered in classes, and there's no need to now go out of our way to point fingers and guilt trip people for being who they are. What good comes out of that? It's true, there are economic disparities in our nation. I'm not denying this. But the solution to that problem is not funding a class that creates division between students. Again, I'm not advocating to completely exclude ethnic studies from our school, but rather to posit a more reasonable alternative, such as making it an optional elective. Schools are a place of intellectual thought, and it is unreasonable to force students to take a
Uh-oh, now we lost. Did we lose Niraj?
Oh, did I cut out?
We lost your last like 10 seconds.
Okay. So I left off at, it's true that there are economic disparities in our nation, and I'm not denying this, but the solution to that is not funding a class that creates division. And I'm also not advocating to completely exclude ethnic studies from our schools. I just think that it would be a better alternative to make it optional, like an elective. Schools are a place of intellectual thought, and it is unreasonable to force students to take a biased class that promotes one political opinion. Indoctrination is unconstitutional and morally wrong. Thank you all for your time.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. That was outstanding. All right, we have Ava back. Perfect. Much better. Let's clear the screen here for you. And then, all right, Ava, are you ready to go? You sound perfect. It was tough signal last time.
Okay, thank you.
You guys are good to go.
Okay. So based on the information that I have received, I was under the impression that we would learn about other cultures and their experiences. But when I joined the class, I realized that they focus less on the culture part and more on the oppressive part, which led to a lot more problems. Like it was too repetitive. A lot of the material the material that we covered during ethnic studies was also covered the year before during the 8th grade American history curriculum. Another reason is they painted some subject as black and white, like personal identity or privilege. And another reason is because of lack of honest discourse. For example, like students felt like answering questions would make their teachers not like them or grade them badly. So I think some ways that I would like the future ethnic studies to look like is that I'd want less feeling questions and more analytical questions. For example, I wouldn't want questions like how did this make you feel? And if they were to ask that, I wouldn't like it to be graded, because then students would just put stuff that would give them a good grade instead of what they actually felt. And I think for topics, teachers should introduce a lot of different viewpoints, and not frame them as good or bad. And also, I want more information about different communities in America, of like, for example, like what circumstances brought them to America or what they'd hope to achieve, cultural impact or economic impact, and just less oppression overall. The course seemed to be presented to give the impression that the experience of these communities were completely bad, which I know from personal experience cannot be true. And like it was said before, ethnic studies is not the study of ethnicities; it's the study of oppression. I very much believe in that statement. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Ava. Did your parents want to say anything?
Want to say anything?
You guys want to say anything?
Hi. Yeah. just to mirror, what Ava said, much of, she came in genuinely excited and kind of, see her crestfallen, after the first few weeks, and our general impression was, that what was just overall negativity, you know, um, about the whole subject of different communities, right? And I remember asking her, like, okay, so you learned about these different communities, right? And she's like, not really. It was more about all the bad things America did to these communities, but we didn't learn anything about their particular history, about about prominent people, their successes. It was just about like basically the bad things, the privileged white people, or the you know cis cis heteronormative people, did to the other, and it just seemed kind of seemed quite a bit of a downer. Um, and 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 again, like Eva said, the general sense was that there was kind of a sense of approved ideas, and the question of how do you feel about it was more an opportunity for students to express merely um, disapproval and consternation or anger at the oppression, and approval about various forms of resilience or resistance. And it just seemed like a very one-sided view, as other people have spoken about as well. And yeah.
Beautiful, perfect. That's a great explanation. I appreciate you sharing that perspective. And again, that's important for the policymakers watching or who will be watching. These are important testimonies to consider. So thank you, Ava and Mr. Kanachi, for speaking up tonight. I really appreciate that. All right, Karthi, you are up to bat. And we have media, so you'll signal for me and I'll put up the right. Okay, floor is yours.
Thank you. Hey everyone, my name is Karthi. Before I really get started, I want to first give a bit of background about myself. Last year, I served as a student representative on the Palo Alto School Board. So that meant that every other Tuesday from 6:30 to 8, 9, sometimes even 10, I would be sitting at the dais with the rest of the school board, listening to staff reports, community comments, and I had the opportunity to share my voice and my thoughts on issues that really mattered, and I was able to represent my peers. One of the most important things that experience taught me, and it gave me a really healthy respect for listening. I think that's what's been missing from this whole process of creating ethnic studies, an unwillingness to listen. So I want to thank you all for coming here and being willing to listen to us today. And I want to share with you a little bit about Palo Alto's experience. From the very beginning, our community had two main issues. We were given almost no clarity about the content of the course. And when concerns were raised based on what we had been given, we were told it was just a brainstorming document and it was unofficial. So why weren't we given official information? Here's one district official answering that question. If we can play clip one.
Sure.
And to the board, our teachers were in the process of creating the course over the past 2.5 years before they implemented the pilot in the fall. And so what was presented was what we had at the time in terms of creating the course. So it wasn't like, let's say, our English language arts adoption that you may have heard about, where we had actual curriculum that we were looking through. Parents were in that on that committee, looking at the curriculum, looking at those lessons. That wasn't what this was. Our teachers actually wrote the curriculum themselves, right? Using research.
Pause that quickly. Two things I want to point out for you all from that video. First of all, we had a pilot course, and presumably that course had a curriculum. But any time that we actually requested more information about it, to the point of filing PRA requests, we were told that the curriculum was still in development and didn't exist yet. And second, she tells us about our district's adoption of the ELA curriculum, where we had parents on a committee working with teachers to resolve their concerns and making sure that everyone was comfortable with its content. Yet in the very next breath, she tells us that the ethnic studies curriculum just wasn't that. My question is, why not? Why aren't we able to have a committee? Why aren't we able to listen to parents, to students, to community members who have very valid concerns about what we're being taught? And really, we haven't got an answer yet. And that's why it's so important that we listen. What we've seen with ethnic studies is just this chronic unwillingness to share information because they're worried that it'll be criticized. And it's not just sharing information with the community. Even the school board was told that despite the fact that there was a pilot course already, this brainstorming document was the only information to exist. Can we look at clip 2?
Understand, just to clarify, that there is no further document developed over the course of the year that would have been more finalized than this working document, brainstorming document, developed a year ago. And if that is true, am I to understand that as a board, we were asked to vote on this really important topic on the basis of a document that is still work in progress, brainstorming created a year ago?
Just a quick point.
Thank you. The answer to her question was yes. The board voted 3-2 to approve the course despite not having the curriculum, despite not showing the community the curriculum, and not allowing people to make educated questions. 3 weeks later, that curriculum was finalized and released to the public. So we have to believe one of two things. Either the curriculum was built in just 3 weeks, despite having nothing more recent than a year-old brainstorming exercise to present to approval for the board, or just maybe, they just chose not to give it to the community and give us that information until public comment was no longer a possibility. I want you to ask yourself, which one is more reasonable? Now, regardless of which possibility you believe, one thing is pretty clear. On the subject of ethnic studies, criticism has been largely unwelcome. Even just having the audacity to ask questions about it is met with anger instead of a willingness to listen. In private, ostracization is common, and even at a public forum like a board meeting, a school board meeting, we see this. We can play clip 3.
Okay. We need to keep, in order for us to be able to talk, so...
Are we allowed to correct some things that you've mentioned here?
I think...
Are we allowed to correct? Because there's a lot of stuff you said that's really
so what I will do, I have
wrong.
a lot of words.
I mean, it's so, you guys, have you guys come to our classes? This is the first time I've met you guys. You've never come to our classrooms to talk about this stuff. Okay. Unbelievable.
So what I would like to do is to ask...
Your education degrees, wow, that's great.
Thank you.
I won't be able to run this.
I'm sorry, I wanted to get that last bit in there because she says I won't be able to run this meeting. That was a Brown Act covered public meeting, right? So anyway, take it away, Carthy, just go ahead.
Yeah, and in this really public meeting, it's a public setting where students are watching, teachers are watching, and the community is watching. We see teachers interrupt calls for order with anger at being questioned. And even when we don't see that anger, our concerns are downplayed, ignored, and invalidated. It's really regardless of whether you believe ethnic studies is a good or a bad thing. You have to ask, why are the people pushing ethnic studies unwilling to listen, unwilling to be criticized, and really just not being able to open their ears and understand why people are concerned? And here's an example of that invalidation, if we can watch clip 4.
Things happen. And someone doesn't always feel comfortable. I worry about the word safe as a person who has to worry about my husband driving and coming home, right? If he gets pulled over. So the word safety is something we have to be a little bit, we have to be aware of what that means. Now, being uncomfortable, absolutely. I feel uncomfortable sitting up here naming that I worry about my husband, but it's the truth. we can feel uncomfortable. That's part of growing and learning and being a human being, but also being part of this community. Our teachers will often feel uncomfortable when a student says something.
Thank you. So what we've seen here is shortly before this comment, parents, teachers, and one school board official themselves raised concerns that parts of the curriculum, especially around controversial issues, were making the community feel unsafe. Students felt unsafe being in the classroom when they were taught that they were the ones who were being oppressors, when they were taught that their privilege and their power made them fundamentally oppressors. And when we faced that question, we were told that what we were feeling was called discomfort, not a lack of safety. We were told that you're not allowed to feel unsafe in this situation because your struggle doesn't compare, because what you're experiencing right now isn't enough to qualify as unsafe. All you're feeling is discomfort. And I think that is the most damning question that we have on this. What we've seen is that teachers and officials aren't willing to face the questions. And I have really great teachers. I love almost every single teacher I have. And the question is that in terms of the process of being implemented, which way is it better? Is it better to have people being able to look at the curriculum before they make decisions, to be able to comment publicly and be able to hear our concerns so we can be comfortable or feel safe with this curriculum? Or is it better to shove it through? I think even if you think that ethnic studies is an amazing idea, it's pretty clear that this strategy of silence as opposed to listening has just led to more division. And I think in a lot of ways, this conversation about ethnic studies has devolved into ethnic tribalism, religious tribalism, and division. But regardless of your opinions on Israel, Palestine, oppression, or really any other controversial issue, I think as humans, we can all agree that listening to other perspectives is important. And that, I think, is the biggest failure of ethnic studies. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I want to thank all of you for presenting. This concludes the student and parent panel. We'll move next to the parent panel, but before we do that, I just again wanted to say thank you, and for everyone who's watching, please at home give a big round of applause. Give a round of applause to yourselves. Thank you so much. And Karthi, I especially want to thank you for taking the time to break apart that Palo Alto school board meeting. I've worked in a lot of different jurisdictions. I've been to a lot of public meetings. That was one of the most poorly run meetings I've ever seen, in my opinion, and I think it does great damage to the community. So I thank you for highlighting that as part of this presentation tonight. Thank you all. So if you want to say good night, and then we will we'll move on to the next panel. Good night.
Thank you everyone for coming here.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you. All right, so we will go ahead and bring in our next panelists. And Karthi, you're still here. All right, Karthi, good night. Okay, next up we have our parent. This is the parents only panel, and we have 5 parents here with us. We're going to start with Peter. Peter, do you mind? You have an impressive resume, but I'm not sure I'll do it justice. Do you mind introducing yourself and letting people know who you are? And we'll let you go up first.
I'd be happy to. I'm Peter Otaki. I was the former mayor and city councilman in Menlo Park for 8 years, from 2010 to 2018. I grew up here in the Bay Area and in Menlo Park, and I have 3 teenagers who have either graduated or are going through Menlo Atherton High School, which is a public high school on the peninsula. So I'm a dad who's a history buff. So I assumed ethnic studies taught about the struggles of ethnic groups to overcome racial discrimination. Stories of Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., Cesar Chavez, Chinese immigrants who built the railroads, and Japanese Americans like my father who were put in internment camps and fought for our country during World War II, and Jewish Americans who made great contributions to this country, among many other stories of resilience. Menlo Atherton High School's motto is strength through diversity. In November 2013, not long after October 7th, my wife and I were appalled after downloading a very one-sided lesson on the Israel-Gaza war from our youngest son's freshman ethnic studies class. Thank you, Dylan, for putting up the slides there. Several slides describe the conflict from only the Palestinian perspective. And this slide, for example, claims the UN says Israel is illegal, and maps infer that Israel has stolen land from the Palestinians. The slides don't mention Hamas is a terrorist organization as declared by both the US and the European Union. The slides don't mention Israel fought for its survival in 1948, 1967, and 1973. As a teenager, I watched as terrorists took Israeli athletes hostage at the 1972 Munich Summer Olympics. Nor do they mention the Camp David, Oslo, and Abraham peace agreements where Israel has reached peace with its Arab neighbors. Nor do the slides mention Iran, its funding of Hamas, Hezbollah, and Houthi, and its foreign policy of death to Israel and death to America. Nor do they mention that Hezbollah killed up 240 American Marines on a peacekeeping mission in Beirut in 1983. What the next slide teaches is the dominant narrative as told by, and if you can go to the next slide, there it is, as told by, and you'll see it in red font, people in power, such as men, white people, rich people, and note the puppet drawing. And often when I see that rich people, I hear Asians included in that, right? And then follow the next slide, which defines the counter narrative told by people with less power, such as women, people of color, and poor people. The last slide excerpt shows the correct answer that the President of the United States is the dominant narrative by virtue of his being in power. And you see, yes, that he's a man, a white person, and so that is the correct answer of this lesson. This dominant and counter narrative teaches a worldview of oppressed versus oppressor by teaching a counter narrative that casts Israel and America as oppressors. If you're a freshman ninth grader like my son who hasn't taken world history yet, who would you rather identify with, as the oppressed or as an oppressor? Generation of kids have been taught in ethnic studies a worldview of oppressed versus oppressor, and it's no surprise to see college campuses awash with Palestinian flags and anti-Semitism. In contrast, we grew up learning in school that America and Israel are beacons of freedom and democracy in the world. We want teachers to teach controversial issues, but we want them to teach our kids how to think, not what to think. The teacher did not follow clear district policy stating that both sides are to be taught on contentious topics. When these slides were brought to the attention of the Sequoia Union High School District Board, the teacher claimed she was the victim of harassment and racial injustice and was backed by the teachers' union. While the teacher left the district to teach elsewhere, the district did nothing to correct this lesson nor its ethnic studies curriculum. We felt disappointed and let down by the board, and we think it's outrageous to teach kids to hate their country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. That's a phenomenal presentation. It's very clear. Next up, we have Ilana Perlman. Ilana, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me. So my name's Ilana Perlman. I'm part of Berkeley Jews in School. Some of the parents within our group brought a civil rights case against our district last year and also brought our superintendent to testify before Congress in a K-12 anti-Semitism hearing. I have 3 children, 2 of whom are in Berkeley public schools, and 1 of whom I pulled out and sent her to Jewish day school because of all the anti-Semitism in our school. I wanted to speak first to one of the things that one of the students was talking about, Ava, talking about how students are wanting to tell their teachers what the teachers want to hear. And I think that that is really, really common in the ethnic studies courses. And it's also common that students are self-censoring themselves. So we don't even know the extent to which people are self-censoring. And I can give you one example, and that's that my son took ethnic studies last year as a Black and Jewish young man. And he had to do a project about cultural identities, all of his identities. And in his project, he only spoke about his Black identity and completely censored his Jewish identity. And when I asked him, like, what about your Jewish side? He literally told me that the timing wasn't right. And when I heard my son say that, what I'm hearing is it's not safe to share that part of your identity in an ethnic studies course where I thought the whole point was to bring different cultures together. And it really was not that. Within a week, a student in another ethnic studies class at Berkeley Unified had their presentation defaced with Free Palestine written all over it when they did not censor their Jewish identity and they shared that they were Jewish. So I think that my son's choice to self-censor means that he knew it wasn't cool, wasn't good to be Jewish right now. And that is deeply disturbing. So that's the first thing I just wanted to share a little bit about the impact on our children. And what is that going to do for future generations to keep pulling people apart more and more? The second thing I wanted to speak to is how important it is for the public to be aware of the way that political organizations, particularly anti-Zionist and radical left-wing political organizations, are using ethnic studies as a way to get into our schools and indoctrinate students. And one of the things that we found in Berkeley Unified is that there are multiple anti-Zionist organizations that were literally founded in Berkeley. So that includes Jewish Voice for Peace, Middle East Children's Alliance, Teach Palestine, International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network, all of these somewhat well-known groups that were founded in Berkeley, and they have found a way to get into our schools. And one of the ways they do that is by planting their employees onto our committees. So our Ethnic Studies Advisory Committee, for example, is full of individuals who represent these multi-million-dollar political organizations, and they sit on our Ethnic Studies Advisory Committee for our district. They have no children in our district. They don't even live in Berkeley. So the executive director of the Arab Resource Organizing Center is on the committee, this committee that nobody can find out how to get onto because it's not listed on Berkeley's website. And there's no transparency and everything is very hidden. And that's part of the whole model. So I ask myself, why is it that people who don't even live in our district are meddling with our Ethnic Studies Advisory Committee? What do they want and what do they not want us to know? I find that to be very dangerous. And I find that to be that groups like Middle East Children's Alliance, who have another group called Teach Palestine, which is the main resource that teachers and ethnic studies departments are going to learn about Palestine, are these organizations that represent only one viewpoint. And then they will paint anybody who doesn't agree with their viewpoint as trying to censor them or trying to not teach about Palestine. When I think about teaching about the Middle East, particularly about Israel and Palestine, I'm not saying don't teach about Palestine. I'm saying, why isn't it called Teach Israel and Palestine? Why is it just teach about one perspective? That's very, very damaging to critical thinking skills. It's really scary to me. So I think that there are some very, very strong political agendas happening, and these organizations are using their multi-million-dollar budgets to find ways into our school system that we don't even know that it's happening. So I strongly encourage people to look at the different committees within their schools and see which parents are participating in, or non-parents. As I said, we have plenty of people who don't have any schools in the district or have any students in the district, but to start being aware of the different school committees and this and that within your schools to see who is trying to push their agenda on our kids and why. So that has been, I will also say that our ethnic studies content curriculum that was drafted on Israel, Palestine last year was hidden from us completely. There are lawsuits that parents have filed specifically to get the curriculum. And I will say anything that happens in the shadows is never a good thing. We don't do that with math. We don't do that with science, where we hide our textbooks and we don't let anybody see what we're writing about. That's not normal. It's not normal behavior, and it's particularly not normal behavior for a public school system that our tax dollars are funding. So anything that happens in the shadows is not good, and I'm hoping that the future of whatever we call it, whether it's ethnic studies, whatever it's going to be named in the future, of basically teaching history from multiple perspectives and teaching facts. That's what I would like to see. It should always happen completely transparently.
Agreed. I think there's a big point of intentional confusion around the definition of what ethnic studies is. One of the things that I was really disturbed about, again, going back to the Palo Alto, the Palo Alto school board meeting is a phenomenal example of how this goes off the rails when trying to implement it. A teacher who was speaking on the panel, the one that erupted at the dais, by the way, they said that they co-create the definition of ethnic studies between the teacher and the student. And I think that is a massive gap in what it should be, and not how things should be developed within classrooms. So thank you, Ilana, for that testimony. I really appreciate your perspective. Mr. Steele, are you ready? Eli, you ready to roll?
Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed hearing all of the speakers before. Just so you know, I have a deaf accent, so hopefully I can speak clearly enough. I am a parent of 2 children in the charter school. They're part of LAUSD in Los Angeles. I've had my own journey through, I guess we should call liberation ideology. So this is my story. I think one of the most outrageous things about this whole affair surrounding ethnic studies, identity politics, is what right does our government have to interfere in the affairs of our families? I come from a multiracial family. My father is Black. My mother is Jewish. My kids are me plus Latino. Is my father oppressed? The people behind ethnic studies will say yes. Is my mother a daughter of Holocaust survivors? The oppressor? They will say yes, because her skin is white. These same people will also put me into the oppressor category because my skin is white. Are these the kind of racial absurdities that we want taught to our children? My family is the product of love. We come from all 4 corners of the world. Some were born here against the will. Some came to escape war. Some for the American dream. And others were here before America's founding. Some of these family members objected when one of their own married outside the race. This was true of some of the whites in my family who believed that marrying a Black during segregation was a sin, or as they used to say back then, bad for the children. This was true of some of the Jews in my family who believed that marrying within was their duty to bring back the 6 million dead. What these objectors had to understand was that their notion of race and tribalism fractured the family. They also had to understand that America is a free country and that love knows no lines of any sort. After years of silence and tribulation, every single one of these objectors eventually chose the higher humanism of love over tribalism. I am the product of 2 generations of interracial marriage. As a young boy in the Bay Area, strangers often told me that my family was beautiful and that we were the future of America. Then I applied to college, and this was in 1991. I was told to pick one race on college application. When I protested that I was not one side, but all of my family, I was nudged towards the black box. Why? Diversity. I resisted even turning down a $25,000 black scholarship. I knew the checking the black box would have forced me into enter what I call the minority state of mind. This would have forced me to divorce myself from my larger American identity, to embrace a far narrower one grounded in the politics of race. In my case, that meant embracing a racialized and victimized mindset in which everything is defined by slavery, segregation, racial disparity, systemic racism, and racism. Just think about that. I mean, that's a lot for an 18-year-old to have to face. In other words, I, a middle-class kid at that time, wouldn't have joined the oppressed class. If I had allowed myself to join the oppressed class, I would have betrayed my black grandfather, who marched in the civil rights movement, so I would have freedom today. I would have also betrayed my Jewish grandfather, who survived the Holocaust and never once lowered himself to the level of victimization. I have countless of other stories in my family, so this is not the only two. Ever since my two teenage kids were old enough, I have told them countless stories of the family, which include a grandmother who came over from Mexico, the first another grandfather who is a part of the Mormon tribe, one of the very first Mormon. I mean, the whole family has so much diversity. And so these government, but one of my problem is that these government officials behind this liberated ethnic studies, or whatever the newest name it can be, they have no right to undermine my children's heritage with a divisive and racist ideology. What good is that going to do to my kid? Or to any other family? It doesn't matter, even if you're a white family and you teach your kid the right values of how to treat people like a human being. What right does the government have to undermine that? And why should my children have to pay heed to an ideology that reduced me at one point to, as a teenager, to black, and now as an adult, as white? What truth is in there other than power? The one lesson that I repeat often to my children is that their ancestors always said one thing: America is the greater country. I would tell my kids that their ancestors knew that it was the people of the past who have failed the American principles for racial power. But the principles are always there. The principles are universal. Why people from all over the world want to come here. The greatness of America lies in her principle, and our greatness depends on if we are willing to fight for and live by these principles. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Eli. That was a really remarkable testimony. And for those of you who are not familiar with Eli and his story, I highly recommend you Google him and watch his material, watch his content. Thank you again so much for your testimony. Next up, Donna Ballas, are you ready to roll? We're gonna have you. There you go.
Yep. Hi.
All right. Floor is yours.
Thank you. My name is Donna Ballas. I have 4 kids in public school in Los Angeles, and I'm Israeli American. My children also identify as such. I have 2 kids in high school right now. When my oldest started high school, immediately was reporting both feeling and observing anti-Semitism before the October 7th war even started. My high schooler went to Israel for first semester of sophomore year of high school. And unfortunately, the semester was cut short because my child was in Israel when the war broke out. They spent a week in and out of bomb shelters, trying to make sense of being on the front lines of a war, just in their opinion, for being in Israel, whether they were Jewish or not, which we are, and returned to their public school to be met with rampant anti-Semitism that was very much unchecked by the school. Over this time now, we have had Honors World History and US History discuss pure fallacies during classroom curriculum that are simply not true, that are taught as fact, like, the Jews took all the land from the Arabs and Jews were never in this land, or when Zionism started in the 1800s, and people left Russia, they left because they felt like it and did not teach about the pogroms, didn't really have time to discuss the Holocaust in a world history class. And these things were brought up to teachers and administrators with nothing actually happening. And it continues to go on. And now I have a student in ethnic studies. I expressed my concerns about ethnic studies before the course started, and was assured that it was being looked at, and the school had the opportunity to kind of decide and create their curriculum. There was zero transparency, there's zero parent involvement, there's zero parent sharing about what is going to be discussed or taught. And then my student received their syllabus, which I did not get to see. The way that I saw the syllabus was that I had to log on to my student's Google Classroom and get it. And the very first line of the syllabus said, based on the LESMCC model, which is the Liberated Ethnic Studies model, which was very clearly stated in many different ways to me prior, that this is not the model that was supposed to be used, that even a full year before the school year started, Gavin Newsom had said not to use this curriculum as a basis for curriculum because it was biased, bigoted, and racist. Reached out to administrators, teachers, reached out to people outside of my school and community to get assistance. And we contacted the school administrators together. The school administrators actually wrote back saying that it's a new teacher and they had nothing to do with the curriculum. Meanwhile, at the school board meeting 2 months ago, the same person who said that they had nothing to do with the curriculum proudly presented to the school board that they themselves created and planned the curriculum. My student shared that they did not feel seen or heard in that curriculum when they were told to study something in history that was in their own family history that had to do with oppression in the United States. They were kind of said that there's not really oppression against Jews in the United States and to pick a different topic. And my student consistently says that all they learn in ethnic studies is talking about how only 3 specific groups are facing oppression and how we need to feel bad for them and everybody else is oppressing them. And there's no learning, there's no discourse, there's no conversation, there's no critical thinking, fact checking for the students to look this up. And there's no discussion about the gains that any oppressed group, regardless of the group, has made. It's only about how horrible it is to be in America as these groups, and none of the other groups are considered. And in general, the anti-Semitism in the school continues with things from swastikas on desks and walls, and students calling children names on social media, which falls under protections against bullying, where the school did nothing. Teachers actually speaking against students in a classroom, having parents and students Jewish parents and students say, hey, this isn't okay. One student was even called a Nazi, a Jewish student, by a teacher, and the student went to the administration. Nothing happened. The parents went to the administration, and after 3 weeks, they apologized in person, but never discussed it again in the classroom. So, the kids don't feel safe to be who they are. Other Jewish students and parents, because I am more outspoken than some, come and confide in me and say that they're scared to speak up because they don't feel like they'll be heard. They feel like they will be retaliated at their jobs, or their student will be retaliated at school. And at this particular school, even though ethnic studies is only a semester requirement, it is required to take for a year. And I wanted to pull my son, and they said that I could not pull my son, and if I did, that I would be withdrawing him and he would get an F. So it's not really feeling like they get to have critical thinking, conversation, or any of these things. And it's very disheartening. I am a huge supporter of, as an Israeli American who has both European and Middle Eastern Jewish family, I've always looked at things from a variety of different backgrounds, and I want my kids to be exposed to different backgrounds, but they also have to learn how to critically think and look at different things. And it is shocking to me that we are only looking at specific parts of what a specific school or curriculum decides is critical thinking, and not letting people look things up or inform. And there's very much just, if a teacher stands up and says something, then this is what it is. And I'll leave it with this. When in world history, they were speaking about the Palestinian problem, like the genocide that Israel was committing against Palestine in this world history class. And my student said, actually, that's not exactly. And the teacher in front of an entire classroom to a student said, oh, really? Do you see it differently? And as brave as my student may be, that's not a very easy or fair place to put a student in front of an entire classroom. And my student sat down and didn't continue speaking up. So that is, to me, the opposite of what we're supposed to be teaching in education. We're trying to encourage children to think and ask questions and understand. Not if you're not agreeing with what the teacher is saying, then we're not going to have a conversation. So that was a little longer than I intended, but thank you for giving me the opportunity to share some of the experiences that we've had.
Thank you, Donna, for speaking up. But I just want to make two points just to hammer home what you said. We have a lot of problems in our public schools today. There are a lot of safety issues that are beyond even the issue of ethnic studies. So people have been asking in the chat, and I saw early on, what is our position on the new bill? And then there is a legislative effort now to push ethnic studies forward in the state of California. And when you listen to Donna's testimony and then consider pumping on the gas and furthering ethnic studies in California public schools without first addressing even the other problems that we have, that's a bad combination. I also want to mention that you may, and again, we're sensitive to personal attacks through speaking up and speaking out. And Donna, you said that students are afraid to speak out and speak up, and that's true. We're hearing that all across the state. And in fact, if you listen very closely to the way that Donna spoke and the way that she told her story, she was very careful to not share personally identifiable information about her students who are her children. And this is the environment that we're in, and this is the climate that we're cultivating in the state of California through this curriculum. So Donna, thank you so much for your testimony. I really appreciate it. Go ahead.
Seeing in the chat that someone said something that says something like facts are facts and ethnic studies is something you shouldn't want to pull out of. I don't want to pull out of anything that teaches facts to my children. I do not want to subject my children to something where they are not allowed to look into their own history or ask questions of the teacher or other students or exhibit critical thinking. And that is not the same as facts. And when teachers have been caught presenting actually false and inaccurate information as truth and history to students, this to me is alarming in public schools. So I am not, and I will never be afraid of my children hearing or facing difficult facts. But that is something that needs to be specified, fact, backed by historical information and not by opinion of a teacher or a specific position that somebody holds. So sorry, that was my last.
You're good. Yeah. So to the commenter there, I think it's Joy. Here, Joy will put you up there, or Jay. Facts and ethics studies is something you never want to pull out because you're uncomfortable with the truth. We want to actually teach the truth and not facts that teachers want to push on students. So here's a fact, maybe Jay, that you may want to learn in your ethics studies class. There is no genocide in Gaza. There's a fact for you. Thank you. Mr. Nyack, you are up. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us, and the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for this opportunity to present a Hindu perspective on this call. Just for the purpose of introduction, I am Chandra Nayak. I reside in Fremont, California, and I would like to introduce myself as a parent of a child studying in Fremont Unified School District. And also, I'm a volunteer for Hindu Education Foundation and have been volunteering for this organization for a few years. I was engaged in the California Department of Education during the last, with the California Department of Education during the last revision of history and social sciences textbooks for the 6th and 7th grade in 2017, because the textbooks had a very negative representation of Hindus, the Hindu civilization, and India as a nation. Starting from that process, I've worked with various curriculum developers. We engaged with publishers and providing supplementary material to the various school districts with a very purpose of making sure that the Hindu kids studying here in California or across US actually do not feel shy or disrespected of their own heritage and culture and the rich civilization which they come from. As a organization, we also contribute heavily to the economically weaker sections amongst us. Every year, we donate about 1,000 plus bags back to school material across California. Now, being part of the Hindu Education Foundation, I have actively tracked the AB 101 bill that mandated ethnic studies in 2021, and I've also looked at the model curriculum since then. My concern with the content then is that it wasn't representing ethnic minorities like me, a Hindu American, with kids who are being born here and they're growing up here. To address this, we engaged with well-trained, acclaimed curriculum developers to present the story of Hindu Americans in California. We offered this content to multiple Bay Area school districts, including Fremont Unified School District, where we testified in front of the FUSD board with a significant number of Hindu parents actually requesting that Hindu Americans be presented as well. However, the content was appreciated and accepted by the school district. It remains at the discretion of the teacher to present it to the students. The latest I checked with the students in FUSD who have gone through a semester of ethnic studies, the content wasn't taught, wasn't even discussed, or wasn't even a suggested optional reading. This makes ethnic minorities like me, a Hindu American, who I believe are making significant cultural and economic contribution to the state of California, completely invisible amongst our own kids. My worry here is, would this be leading us to being invisible to the larger community, to the lawmakers that make us bystanders rather than the stakeholders in the story of California? That's my primary concern. And that's why I'm working with various school districts to have some representation of Hindu Americans and let their stories be told as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I want to thank you for your testimony, and I also want to thank, again, the Hindu American Foundation for partnering with us on this event. I think it's very important. People have been criticizing criticism of ethnic studies, saying that it excludes, I guess, white ethnicities or European ethnicities, and that's not a fact. The fact is that it excludes a lot more non-white ethnicities as well. So I really appreciate your testimony and for speaking up and speaking out. And again, I want to give a big round of applause to all of you parents for speaking up. And thank you for sharing your story. Again, I know it's not easy and I know it's painful for your families, but thank you for sharing this testimony. And I'm really hoping that lawmakers are paying attention to your stories and that we need to do what's right to keep your families and your students safe. So thank you again. Thank you, thank you. All right, so we are, we're going to move on now to the next panel. And Nadia. All right. So thank you all for joining. This is the school board panel. Just a little programming note, and Allison, we're going to start with you. Allison is not a school board member, but she is a parent of a Palo Alto student. And we're going to have Allison go first because she is going to share a little bit more about Palo Alto. We heard about Palo Alto from our amazing student, Karthi and Niraj, but now we're going to hear it more from the school board perspective. So Allison, I will let you take it away. The floor is yours. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, huge shout out to Karthi. He was a courageous student board member, and often that is not well accepted in boards. He really beautifully described what the meeting was like. So I can tell you a little bit more about what happened before. So my daughter went through the Palo Alto schools and she applied to colleges last year at the height of the protests. So I see the toxic environment at colleges, and what keeps me involved in this is what I don't want that in our schools. I don't want that preparing kids for college and fueling this. So I've watched this board closely and been involved for the past 6.5 years through multiple elections. And what was special now is that last November, we elected 3 brilliant board members who were parents committed to advocating for inclusive ethnic studies and transparency. The few details the district had shared about the proposed ethnic studies course showed it was clearly ideologically driven. For a year, we requested meetings, produced a petition with over 1,400 signatures, and advocated that Palo Alto provide standards and transparency before imposing a mandate. To this date, PAUSED has refused to properly fill public records requests for the curriculum and instructional materials, providing a brainstorming document. Instead, 2 days before the vote, the board meeting on whether to delay ethnic studies was so chaotic. The lead editor of our newspaper wrote a furious description of the violations. There was bias in who entered the room and who could speak, and the audience was raucous, as you could see. One of our new board members, Rowena Chu, said more than once during the meeting, "I feel unsafe." Educators clearly pressured the board not to delay the mandate. This brainstorming document had seriously problematic content, but the staff insisted that we must trust the teachers. Delaying a year was impossible, they said, even though we have a non-mandated ethnic studies. They said it had to be mandated. One of our 3 new trustees ultimately caved to the pressure, stating he thought he could work with the teachers to revise the curriculum. To this day, there's not a completed curriculum to be reviewed by the board members or the public, as is our legal right. What was most troubling was how destructive the discussion about oppression was. In response, and you heard the response of the director of curriculum and instruction, but what happened right before that was what Ms. Chu said. So in response to the question of why people feared ethnic studies, courageous Rowena Chu said, The fear is based on an ideological framework around oppressor-oppressed that will make some students in this school district feel unsafe. Now, whilst I may not be part of that affinity group, I have great empathy with any situation where some students feel unsafe. As a school district, we need to take time. Many, particularly the Chinese and Jewish communities, were aghast when the director of curriculum and instruction then suggested that Ms. Chu should instead use the word uncomfortable, saying, "We can feel uncomfortable. That's part of growing and learning." In contrast, the director stated that she could feel unsafe as an African American who might be stopped by a police officer while driving. So I believe this ranking of oppression is what ignited our community. Someone reposted this meeting segment on X, identifying the director, all publicly available information. Ms. Chu responded, "As an elected official, I spoke up about Asian oppression and I was suppressed." Unfortunately, posts below hers were angry and many deemed racist against this African-American staff member. When she was informed, Ms. Chu took down her post and apologized in 2 interviews and an official public statement. Yet she was asked to resign and continues to receive hostile responses daily. We had hoped she would speak here, but she's now silenced herself. To our knowledge, she's only the 2nd Chinese trustee ever in a school system that's 40% Asian. She received the most votes in the election and is an inspiration to us all. But we fear for her well-being and the well-being of her children. These school systems have deep legal pockets while board members are volunteers. Since then, hundreds of parents from the Jewish, South, and East Asian online communities came together on WhatsApp and WeChat groups. The Chinese community especially was outraged that they could not use the word unsafe, and several reported that their children had been attacked and sexually harassed without consequences. Families across PAWS have started a recall against one of the board members who for years told them their children didn't deserve challenging academics, a litigation attorney who wrote a nasty resolution condemning Ms. Chu. In addition to the toxic divisiveness that even a discussion of ethnic studies has created in our community, these ideologically based courses destroy quality education. This class is replacing a half year of world history. Similarly, the California Math Framework reduced the percentage of text dedicated to math instruction from 66% to 6%, replacing it with political ideology and formally slowing down and dumbing down math. And that's how I've become close to the Chinese community. We fight for good math. The legally mandated education code for instructional material review was ignored by the Palo Alto School Board with absolutely no consequences, as were the CSBA directives about a board's responsibility to review instructional materials. At this point, no one has laid eyes on a curriculum that has not even been developed, but that somehow has been approved sight unseen and mandated for 14-year-olds to take in the fall. It's always the students who are harmed by this lack of oversight and enforcement. And sorry if this went on a little long. Several parents contributed to this statement.
Allison, thank you so much for making that special statement. And I do just want to comment that my organization is aware of what happened in Palo Alto, specifically with Trustee Chu, and we want to express our full support for her and what she's going through, and hope that the situation, we'll try to work and make sure the situation improves. So thank you for speaking up on her behalf.
Thank you.
So now we'll move to our actual school board members who could attend, because they're not being attacked in the same way, I hope not, that Trustee Chu is. Nadia, I want to thank you so much. I know it was tough to get here. And many, by the way, for those watching, many school board members wanted to participate tonight, but either couldn't because they're in meetings right now or because they're being harassed by their community. So thank you guys for all showing up and for speaking out. So Nadia, thank you again, and I'll give you the floor.
Hi, thank you, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to this forum. And I do want to focus about, we can spend all night talking about the things that we have heard in our board meetings or what are the problem. But for me, as a board member, I want to focus, if we continue with these ethnic studies, we should, for me, it should be dedicated to the study of human civilization from culture, food, language, knowledge, music, government, finance, commerce, religion, history, the good, the bad, the ugly, about every ethnic that existed in this world. Ethnic studies in the school system nowadays is to become rebel without knowing the way to really change and modify the system. So it's just against the system, hate your country, hate everything that the system has created. And we are a humanity that have created the system we're living today, and it can be modified for the good. So it should teach us, to our students, the U.S. Constitution and the international rights, how to modify the world we have. I will conclude with these thoughts about in general. I'm against wars and against human right abuse. My desire for Israel and Palestine is to have a new prospect for peace, similar to the one in September 1993 between Isaac Rabin and Yasser Arafat. We saw how close Israel and Palestine were to have a peace for centuries. I mean, who wants to live in this environment? I'm a survivor of war, and I know what it is for both sides. So that's my desire for Palestine and Israel. What we are witnessing here is the auto-destruction of public education and public schools and teacher unions, creating kids against the system without real knowledge of laws. Let's modify ethnic studies or ethnic education to an open knowledge of our world with laws, knowledge how to really conquer humanity freedom. So that's my desire for as a school board member, and that's what I'm trying to preach moving forward. How I think it's necessary, the study of ethnic studies as a reference of cultural knowledge, and see how societies have created systems, but how to modify the systems to become a better humanity. So that's my point of view. I hope it resonates in you what I'm saying.
Beautiful. Thank you, Nadia. I hope you, we might have to take you up to Sacramento to lobby to help our lawmakers understand your perspective. I really appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good night, all.
Have a good night. All right. Ms. Jacobson, the floor is yours. And you can go ahead and let me unmute you real quick, or maybe you unmute, if you can unmute.
All right, can you hear me?
5 by 5, good to go. Perfect.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak tonight. I have so many things to say. I wrote out everything, and ChatGPT said it was going to take 20 minutes, and so it cut it down to hopefully 5. But here we go. I'm speaking tonight as both a parent and a school board member. I first learned about ethnic studies in 2020 when my daughter took the class as a 9th grader. Our district was one of the first in California to make it a graduation requirement, even before AB 101. Because her class was online during the pandemic, I saw much of the content firsthand. What I expected to be a broad study of different ethnic histories instead focused heavily on white power, privilege, and systemic oppression. My daughter was taught that America was fundamentally racist, that colorblindness was a form of white supremacy, and that colonization and oppression defined our history. Meanwhile, major milestones like the 14th Amendment and the Civil Rights Movement were largely ignored. As I dug deeper, I realized these concepts came from critical race theory and Marxist frameworks, yet students were not given the tools to question or debate them. Why was my daughter being taught about hegemonic systems and colonization before she had even taken world history? Why was she being labeled as part of an oppressive group based on her race, religion, or gender? Why was gender ideology included in a course about ethnicity? I found myself having to detox the lessons at home, encouraging my daughter to think critically about what she was learning. In 2022, I ran for the school board hoping to push back on this growing trend, but what I found was even more concerning. Ethnic studies tenets were being incorporated into other subjects. World history courses downplayed Western thought while prioritizing resistance movements like the Zapatistas in Mexico, without critical analysis of their long-term failures. U.S. history was rewritten through an ethnic studies lens, emphasizing race and oppression over broader historical context. To put this in perspective, my daughter graduated high school without ever learning about the French Revolution, Marxist communism, or the Cold War, all of which are in the state content standards. Keep that in mind when considering this new bill. State standards will not create any guarantees at the classroom level. When the board voted on the new U.S. history course, I was the only trustee to vote no, citing concerns about bias and major knowledge gaps. But I learned that board approval didn't really matter. Teachers who wanted to teach through an activist lens were already doing so, and those who didn't would ignore the course of study document. Unlike K through 8, where board-approved curricula and materials are mandatory and consistent from class to class, high school teachers have enormous autonomy in lesson planning. In March 2023, our district held a study session on ethnic studies after community members raised concerns. But instead of an open discussion, the presentation was a sales pitch. All student work showcased and testimonials given were positive, and dissenting voices were absent. When a Jewish parent spoke about concerns of anti-Semitism, a teacher interrupted and called him a liar. Another speaker's microphone was cut off when he criticized an administrator, even though criticism is protected speech. In this meeting, we were repeatedly told that ethnic studies is love, but the hostility toward opposing views told a different story. If teachers can't tolerate criticism in a public meeting, how can students feel comfortable sharing their perspectives in the classroom? I will just add that after seeing those clips from Palo Alto and hearing about their meeting recently, it was very, very similar at our ethnic studies study session. So you can kind of get a picture of what it was like in the hostile environment. I wanted to close with 3 key issues that have come to light in our district after having ethnic studies over the past 5 years. Number 1, the placement of ethnic studies in 9th grade is problematic. Freshmen are still developing analytical skills and historical knowledge. Many of the concepts needed to fully access ethnic studies, like imperialism, Marxism, and other key historical developments, are covered in world and U.S. history courses currently taken after ethnic studies rather than before. Some teachers view this as a bug, while others see it as a feature of the current sequence. The focus on identity may also pressure students to view themselves through a racial or gender lens rather than as individuals. Second, ideological mission creep is real. Teachers in other subjects reference ethnic studies themes to frame discussions. One example is a biology teacher who recently bragged that she could ask students to name institutional oppression in healthcare, and they immediately brought up Trump's statement that there are only 2 sexes. Students quickly learn which viewpoints are acceptable and which will get them labeled. Third, ethnic studies is a movement, not just a course. A veteran teacher in my district put it best. Ethnic studies aims to transform students into activists. While exposing injustice is valuable, open inquiry and civil discourse are casualties of the movement. Students are not taught to debate or critique these ideas. They are led to accept a predetermined narrative about power, privilege, and oppression. The same dynamic is present in board meetings when people apply this reductive lens to discussions about any race-related topic. The assumption is that any critique is rooted in racism. This prevents engaging with alternative perspectives in a pluralistic manner. The identity of the person speaking is weighed more heavily than the substance of their argument. As a board member, I face a difficult reality. While I personally believe ethnic studies should be an elective, our district has embedded it into every level of education, and the majority of board members have signaled unwavering support for it. Even with legislative changes, I don't see ethnic studies as we know it in my district going anywhere. Here's what we can do. These are my suggestions. First, districts who haven't implemented ethnic studies yet can pause while communicating that they are leaning into the state social science framework that already promotes a greater inclusion of marginalized groups. Also, they should consider placing ethnic studies in the 11th or 12th grade rather than freshman year. Second, don't be afraid to raise complaints to the school administrators. Familiarize yourself on Board Policy 6144 on controversial topics. Many ethnic studies lessons violate this policy. Filing a formal complaint triggers an investigation and intervention. It is the best way to bring light to problematic content or interactions. Our family has had to do this, and it worked. Sometimes a lawsuit is the next step. All of these actions put pressure on boards and districts to take action. Of course, we welcome public comments and at board meetings, but they really don't move the needle. Formal complaints with evidence carry a lot more weight. To that end, the federal government has signaled that it will be investigating educational complaints filed through the Office of Civil Rights. This is the mechanism that may trigger funding withdrawals if the district does not resolve the issues. Anyone may file a complaint with the OCR. Lastly, you can support initiatives for school choice. There was a proposition in California a couple years ago that didn't quite make it onto the ballot, but I hope that one will come up in the future. At best, a school choice prop would open up alternative education choices for families, and at the least, it would put the teachers' union on notice. To be honest, I'm homeschooling my 7th grade twins right now through a charter school, and we haven't decided yet if they will attend high school in the district. That's all I have. So I'll close with that.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, I want to thank you for your testimony, and again, from your perspective and Nadia's perspective, and then from the testimony that the perspective that Allison shared. I think it's incredibly important for, again, lawmakers and legislators to understand what you guys are experiencing at the board level. Can I just ask you, and Nadia, you can feel free to unmute and answer as well. Can I ask you, we have a new bill that has been introduced. Have you, I mean, San Mateo isn't in the middle of nowhere. Have you been, and neither is Daly City, by the way, Nadia, but have you been reached out to by legislators? Has anybody from Sacramento reached out to you to get your perspective or to hear from you?
No.
Allison, you either? Nobody? No. Okay. Well, I hope that this forum provides that perspective, and I hope that they do reach out and get your perspective beyond what we've talked about here tonight. And again, for anybody listening, that is the purpose of this. This is just the tip of the iceberg. These are select groups of panelists who are representative of a much larger community of concern around the state of California about this. Allison, did you want to make a quick comment?
I just wanted to say to you, board representatives, thank you for your courage when you stand up. I never dreamed how hard it was, and it's so beautiful to hear what you say. Standing with your community means a lot to us.
I also wanted to say, Trustee Jacobson, just to your point about the OCR and the appointee to the OCR, at least for the Department of Justice, is Harmeet Dillon, for those who don't know. Harmeet Dillon is a lawyer who is based in San Francisco. She has been appointed by the president to head up the Office of Civil Rights in the Department of Justice. We are, for those listening and watching, we are already in touch with her. As soon as she gets confirmed, she says, we have an open door to her office, and we look forward to using it when she's in. So I really hope that the state fixes this issue so that we don't have to use that option. But it seems like there are entrenched people moving forward. So anyway, thank you again, trustees. And thank you, Allison, for your testimony. And we are going to move on now to the final segment of the evening. And this segment, we will be talking about solutions. And do we have all the right people? Yes, perfect, good. So this is the solutions panel. So in the case that you are not able to stop, or that we're not able to stop ethnic studies from moving forward in the kind of destructive way it's moving forward now, and you have to have an ethnic studies course, Ilana will share that perspective. For those who are looking to pause, Nicole, I think you will share that perspective, and Larry, you will share. I think Trustee Jacobson set you up very nicely for the ballot measure.
She did.
Yeah. So I think Nicole, you are up first. And I have one more panelist here, Amy. Amy is who is going to represent. Sorry, Amy, you're going to represent the Long Beach perspective. But Nicole, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for sticking it out. And I know this is a long webinar. It's a lot of testimony, but I think if anything has really solidified the trends that we are seeing, not just in California, but this is something that we're also seeing across the entire country. And I think I actually have a tremendous amount of relief and faith in the future, having seen the students who were featured here tonight. I do have some comments on, some of the things that were said previously, and I also have some prepared statements. I will say that I am a co-founder of a local grassroots organization called Peer K-12. We were formed as parent advocates dealing with the rise in anti-Semitism that we were seeing in school districts that actually brought us into the conversation about ethnic studies, because we were looking for the source of the anti-Semitism that we were seeing across the board. With regards to pausing, I have, I guess, the unique distinction of being one of the parent leads in the San Diego Union High School District, where recently, after about 4 years of ongoing conversations and meetings and board meetings and community sessions, our board did vote to make ethnic studies a pilot, an optional pilot for just the next coming year, so 25-26, and then revisit the issue moving forward depending on what would happen at the state level with regards to funding. This is it's a win for sure, but it's a stopgap. It's a Band-Aid that we were able to get after, and I'm not exaggerating, 3 or 4 official board meetings, sessions, community events, all sanctioned by the district, all of them hidden deep inside district communications. Most parents in the district didn't really know about it. I had to really find it and dig for it and then bring it to the public to showcase. It is possible to do, but it's not a forever solution. And I think that what we're really seeing is the consistent issues that have been brought up, whether you're in a district that has had it for many, many years, or in a district where it's just starting to pop up, or a district like mine that we've been discussing it for the last 2-3 years. I want to read something that our district, despite having paused on the mandated portion, is still included in the pilot as an optional piece, but this is part of the curriculum. And I quote, "If you are not Indigenous, then you are a settler, and you are accountable as beneficiaries of the violence that makes it possible for you, 14-year-old ninth grader, to be here. Remember, unless your ancestors came here in chains, you are here because you have unearned privilege from the history of genocide and land theft perpetuated by generations of aggressive settlement and ongoing systemic structural genocide. It goes on, and this is, by the way, an assignment that ninth graders, 14-year-olds, are going to be required to take if they opt in to the ethnic studies class. Settler fragility stems from settler privilege, which is similar to white privilege in that it is systemic, structural, and based on white supremacy, making it very difficult to identify, only that settler privilege is far more covert and cunning because of the ubiquitous ways that the US has been normalized. US citizens of all races and ethnic groups have been indoctrinated their entire lives with messages designed to foster a sense of national pride in the US and a belonging and the making of what has been called an imagined community. What makes settler privilege so much more beguiling and difficult is that it cuts to the core of American identity, subtly calling into question the legitimacy of the US. Decolonization, therefore, is the process of deconstructing these colonial ideologies of the superiority and privilege of Western thought and approaches. Okay, so despite the fact that we did manage to pause ethnic studies as a required course here in San Diego, that is still going to be part of the optional course that students will be able to opt in. Now, I am a parent in this district. I have an 8th grader and a 5th grader. I am also the daughter of immigrants who came here from Israel. My grandparents survived the Holocaust and various pogroms. And as an American, the first person in my family to be born in this country on both sides, I found the ethnic studies materials that we reviewed during our community engagement sessions toxic. And it was one of the reasons why I kept advocating for this to not be implemented. I quickly learned that, because we had a 3-2 split on our board, completely walking away from ethnic studies was probably not going to be an option. And so we definitely leaned into the choice. But, again, I think what we've witnessed in the realm of ethnic studies from schools really is a compelling argument for not just pausing, but really taking a global, let's just put a moratorium on everything that's going on right now until we can start to fix some of the issues that we've been seeing over the last few years. So these incidents are not isolated. I have a lot more examples, but I don't know if time permits me to even go into them. But I think one of the things that I found most interesting in the community engagement sessions, and this is also something we heard before, was that the pushback against us parents coming in with our concerns was incredibly alarming and very specific. So this past fall, when I engaged in the district's curriculum review, I questioned whether there were alternatives to this land acknowledgement, which I read before. And I felt it was not appropriate and deeply troubling, and I really asked for a different alternative. In that session, I was proceeded to be attacked. A teacher and teacher union reps who were in that session stood up and started screaming at me. They were yelling at me that I was a racist, that I was uneducated, that I was fear-mongering, that I didn't know what I was talking about. And really all I was doing was asking a question about why we really need to have a land acknowledgement that goes so deep and so specific into advocating for the disintegration of the United States of America. So, one thing that I like to do, and this is me, I like to go into the data. I think this is one of the reasons why, here in our district, they were a little bit more receptive. We come with a lot of data. California is the 19th in terms of spending on education. The most recent budget that was released, we're spending a staggering $24,764 per student. And again, this differs dramatically between school districts. But we, at the same time, rank 41st in terms of education achievement. So we're spending almost $25,000 per student in our districts on average, and we still rank 41st. California fourth graders and eighth graders, roughly 72%, cannot read at grade level. And yet, when we propose education reform bills at the state level to address some of these deficiencies, for example, AB 2222, which was a proponent for the science of reading being implemented, it was defeated and removed from conversation in about 5 weeks. Okay, so we have this imbalance between ethnic studies bills, which apparently now we're going to go start all over again from the very beginning and have a whole discussion about a whole new ethnic studies bill when we still haven't even really figured out how to engage or implement or deal with the ones that we've already passed. Someone mentioned the Office of Civil Rights. So currently, there are 205 open Title VI violation investigations since October 2023, okay? And the number 205 open investigations are in California alone. So when you come to a district and you give them stats like this, it does give them pause, although again, the pause is very, very temporary. So I also have some ideas about how we might be able to extend this pause. And I know I'm taking up a lot of extra time here, so I apologize, but one of the things that I really feel is super important that we don't have, and I think the state level can really, this is something that we really need at the state level, is a unified reporting system. There is not a unified, single, transparent system for reporting and tracking all of the complaints. And I think that if we had that, similar to tonight, you could see the similarities between all of the different school districts and how systemic the Jew hatred is in our schools. Another piece is accountability for noncompliance. You have tons of school districts in the state that are not complying with AB 101, much less any new ethnic studies bills that might be coming down the pipeline. And you have 205 investigations at the Office of Civil Rights that there needs to be some accountability for. Curriculum transparency is something also that came up many times, which is also on my list. So school districts are actually supposed to be posting all of their curriculum on their websites. It's supposed to be publicly available. It is not. And if you have ever tried to ask for a curriculum from your school district, you will know how incredibly difficult it is to get that information out of the school district, even if your kids are the ones who are in the school. Another suggestion that I have is funding restrictions. I think that this is something, hopefully now with our new federal government really looking into these things, restricting funding that goes to schools with consistent violations of curriculum transparency, not sharing curriculum with students or parents, civil rights violations, recurring complaints that are connected to ethnic studies, or any violations of California Education Code should have their funding paused, halted, or removed. We need to establish here in California a merit caucus. We have a serious merit problem in California. It is impossible that we are spending $25,000 per student, and we are ranked number 41 out of 50 states. I recommend looking at whatever Louisiana is doing because they are ranked number 1. And I can promise you they are not spending $25,000 per student. My last suggestion is an absolute moratorium, a pause on all ethnic studies legislation, whether it's new legislation, whether it's existing, whether it's funding existing mandates, etc. We've got to put a pause on this until we can figure out all of these other issues that are going on. I think that at the very least, resolving, let's say, half of the OCR violation complaints would be in order before we move forward in any school district with any more ethnic studies. I think our state literacy rates must improve in order for any money or budgets to be allocated for any additional things. And I think, maybe the bar should be, we should flip that. Instead of having our, fourth and eighth graders not being able to read at grade level with 70%, I think we should have 70% who are reading at grade level before we start funding new initiatives. These budget allocations are a huge piece of the conversations locally, even though I would argue that at the state level, just because they're not funding ethnic studies doesn't mean that the districts aren't implementing them, but you certainly can make that case in your district. I'm sorry, I know I went way over, but there's so much to say and so many incredible comments from before, especially again from the students, that I think this conversation warrants a huge pause until we can sort these things out, not just at my district level, but across the entire state. Thank you again for the opportunity.
Agreed. Thank you so much. And again, I think those stats are very concerning. And again, if we're 19th in spending and 41st in performance, I don't think the answer necessarily is more ethnic studies. And by the way, if our schools are as unsafe as we all know that they are, what are we doing to make them safer? Putting standards in place that won't come online maybe for 3 years seems challenging to me. Those are the current proposal. Ilana, you are up. Ilana, I want to thank you for co-hosting with us tonight and for giving some perspective from your organization. And I will let you have the floor. We'll just see. Are you on? Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah. And do you have the
presentation?
Yeah.
And then you'll just tell me when to.
Ooh, does not. That looks very.
I think that just the first one's smushed. I think the rest of it is okay.
Okay, I'll trust you on this. So I'm coming with a slightly different perspective. I am a part of the Alliance for Constructive Ethnic Studies, ACES, and we do 3 things. We are, first of all, a diverse, nonpartisan coalition, and we are working to remove a lot of the narrow ideology that the students and parents have talked about today from ethnic studies and from high school curriculum as a whole. And we are here to enable curriculum that instead inspires mutual respect, fights racism, and celebrates ethnic accomplishments, which are things that we've been hearing are missing from our curriculum thus far. We do this through 3 different ways. One is exposing the curriculum. We've heard that it's, as Nicole was just speaking, and from other parents, that it's very difficult to obtain the curriculum, how our board trustees supposed to understand and approve the curriculum if they cannot access it. And so we work with partners, with school administrators, with trustees on learning what is in the curriculum and discussing the topic of ethnic studies with different communities. We also mobilize communities. If you are a parent, a trustee, or a student on the call, and you are looking for other parents to engage with, to know that you are not alone in your district, we will connect you with other individuals who are working in your area to solve these issues. We believe that ethnic studies should be doing 3 core things, which is building bridges of understanding, building mutual respect, and empathy. All things, again, that we've heard are missing from the curriculum from all of our brave students and teachers and parents today. We want a curriculum that emphasizes contributions and accomplishments of the ethnic groups, many of which are missing from the curriculum as a whole. We want to discuss how ethnic groups have fought for equality in the past, what work remains, and how we can address these issues today. And most importantly, we want the classroom to be a place where students can engage and discuss with their peers and with teachers, where they aren't afraid to ask questions, where they can engage in critical thinking, and where they feel safe and secure in the classroom. So we've heard a lot of examples of material that's coming into the ethnic studies classroom today. I want to take a step back so that we see what a typical ideology-based or liberated ethnic studies outline looks like. And so if you receive your outline, you'll kind of know what to look for, and you'll understand what the outline means as well. We typically see when curriculum is based in ideology as opposed to ethnic groups, it talks about 4 key issues. 1, identity and narrative. 2, systems of power. 3, hegemony and counter-hegemony. And 4, revolution, resistance, and social justice. Somebody was just saying, my curriculum taught my student to be a social activist instead of teaching them academics. That's the unit that comes in. What's missing from this framework and from this curriculum is ethnic groups. What we have seen over and over again is that the actual ethnic groups are missing from any of these categories, because instead these are the ideologies of power, that anyone who holds power is oppressive. In San Francisco, for example, only 3 of the entire curriculum slides mentioned ethnic groups at all, and they were all in the context of victimhood. Ethnic groups are only introduced to enforce this narrative, where you expose the problem, show that there's oppression, discuss trauma, resistance, and revolution. And it ends always in revolution. So let's talk about how we can talk about ethnic studies instead. We want to discuss what is community, what is building American culture, how can we build engagement and community in our classroom, just as an introduction. We don't need to break students up into oppressors and victims. We don't need them to identify by their skin color or religion. We need to bring them together. Second of all, we need to be looking at this from a historic perspective. And that means studying immigration. How did we get here? What did the ethnic groups bring to the table as they've come in through the immigration and migration process? What's also been missing that we've seen is civic engagement. Who has participated in the American society, and how has that influenced our communities? When has it been successful? How can students be more engaged? We need to talk about contributions and different role models, not just role models that have existed in revolution and resistance, but role models that have provided positive messaging and been successful, that students can see themselves in as as examples. We've seen that what's missing from the curriculum thus far is academics, resources, and objectives. We want a curriculum that has been put together with history in mind, academic value, and is connected with state standards in history and the social studies. We've worked for months with a multitude of phenomenal teacher volunteers who have been reviewing lessons and providing academic objectives so that we can assemble lesson plans from numerous districts, as well as resources recommended and approved by the state, and create a resource database that your district and your teachers can use. And we've assembled it into the sample curriculum that we're happy to provide to anyone who is interested. An easy way to understand if your curriculum is liberated or ideology-based is by looking at the role models that they discuss. Are the role models always engaged in some kind of physical violence? Do they associate with terrorist organizations? And do they admire other terrorist organizations like Bin Laden or Al-Qaeda? If these are the only role models in your curriculum, then you know that that is a liberated curriculum. Now, if you look at role models currently missing from a lot of districts, some pretty obvious ones, Martin Luther King. Do you talk about African American Black history and leave out Martin Luther King? Or is your curriculum only talking about Martin Luther King? Because students have covered that throughout K to 8. So who else can they learn from? What other role models can you provide for them, and make sure that they show that change within the system, that they're proud to be Americans, and see the lasting impact of them? So I wanted to put my email out here to say that if you're interested in providing lessons, resources, outlines to your district, please email me. If you need to connect with other parents, engage in districts across California, come talk to us, and I hope that we can provide those resources to you.
Ilana, that was awesome. Thank you so much for that presentation. There was a question from Shimon in the audience. I thought that maybe you could mention, I know you mentioned at the end, but just to hammer it home, do you have an actual model curriculum that we can offer to schools?
Yeah, so we have a sample curriculum, a sample outline with resources. I want to emphasize that these aren't ACES lessons, that what we've done is we've reviewed hundreds of full outlines and lessons, both that are recommended currently by the state and from districts teaching ethnic studies and history all over California. And we've compiled those lessons that are already in use or already approved by the state, so that you can say, here is a revolutionary way to look at ethnic studies in history with academic values and present those to them. So it's not like we're coming in as a third party and saying, let's rethink your entire structure. We're saying, here are already existing resources that you can use to have an empowered education in your school, and that provides some kind of real instructional materials, not just YouTube videos, and is centered in academic objectives and not, as Jen Jacobson recently said, love and social justice exclusively.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, again, thank you for your presentation. And I highly recommend people learn more about ACES, support you guys. Your work is really, really important. And thank you for what you do. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Pegram.
Dylan.
You are up, sir. So tell us about this. Well, give us your presentation, but tell us about this ballot measure. I think Jacobson teed it up for us.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening. I am the CEO and founder of an organization called Informed Parents of California. We are a parents' rights and parental control organization. We believe strongly in transparency between schools and the parents, and the test scores in California are abysmal. We think that we want to raise those test scores by focusing our teaching on STEM and STEAM subjects. I would like to direct you to our website, www.ip-ca.org. That's www.ip-ca.org. When you go to our website, you will see in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see a button. It's called the opt-out button. We worked very closely with an organization called Pacific Justice Institute, headed by Brad Dacus. They created opt-out notices for 40 of the roughly, the 50 states. The opt-out notice for California allows a parent to opt out of everything that is legally opt-outable in the state of California. And I'll get into what that is in just a moment. So by going to our website, clicking on that green button, and by a parent taking 2 minutes and filling out the opt-out notice form, docu-signing at the bottom of their screen and clicking submit, a legally binding opt-out notice goes directly by email to their student or their child's principal and to the superintendent of their child's school district. Don't have to download it. You don't have to print it out. You don't have to fill it out. You don't have to stick it in an envelope. You don't have to sign it. It goes in less than 2 minutes to the principal and the superintendent of the schools. What can you opt your child out of? Well, CSE, comprehensive sexuality education. It is mandated for 1 year in the 7th grade and for 1 semester in high school, but school districts are now taking CSE which is a pleasure-based, not a health-based or biology-based or reproductive-based sex ed program down to the 5th grade level and even lower. CSE also flirts with transgenderism and the gender indoctrination stuff. Counseling. Counseling by district personnel and by third-party personnel without the permission of the parents. And third-party outside organizations would be organizations like Planned Parenthood. That a child can also be opted out of. And then the last is intrusive surveys. And that's where, a third grader will be asked the question, choose from any one of these 8 or 9 gender identities. Which one do you identify with most closely? That is also legally opt-outable in California. And the opt-out notice does that. And we recommend that every parent in the state of California go to our website and opt out his or her child from all of this nonsense. It was mentioned earlier that there is a school voucher or a school choice initiative that was on the ballot in 2022. There is another school choice amendment or initiative that is being proposed for the 2026 ballot. It's called the Children's Educational Opportunity Act, or the CEO Act. I am fearful, very fearful for my country. I think that unless we break the hold that the teachers unions have on the education system in the state of California, we're going to lose this. We're going to lose this generation, and we're going to lose our country. The only way, in my opinion, that we can break that hold quickly is to change the way that schools are fundamentally financed. And right now, the child chases the money. And what we need to do is have the money chase the student so that the student directs where their education dollars go, not that they have to go to a government school to take advantage of government funding for education. So that's the Children's Educational Opportunity Act. The act has been drafted. There were some problems with the 2022 initiative. Those have been cleaned up. The language is being polished up and is about to be submitted for title and summary. Once Rob Bonta gets a shot at it, it'll come back. The title and summary will be egregious. There will be a lawsuit to get it so that it's at least a modicum of fairness. And then we'll have 6 months to collect 1,250,000 signatures to qualify it for the ballot. It takes about 850,000 qualified signatures. The sponsors of the initiative are recommending that we get somewhere between 1,200,000 and 1,300,000 signatures to make sure that we get it on the ballot. Once we get it on the ballot, then comes 2026, and all of you are going to be asked to give us a hand in telling your friends and neighbors and the clerk in the grocery store, the guy at the gas station, everybody about the importance of changing the way that schools are financed in the state of California. So again, www.ip-ca.org. Please check out our website, and let's get ready to link arms and see what we can do about recapturing this generation of young people in California.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to ask you a quick question from the audience. We spoke about this before. Someone is asking if parents have the ability to opt out of ethnic studies. Can you explain what the situation is around that?
The opt-out notice that is available through Pacific Justice Institute, and we are merely the delivery system, we did not draft the notice, has everything that is legally opt-outable. Ethnic studies is not currently opt-outable, although there is a piece of legislation that was introduced, to my knowledge, last week that would allow parents to opt their kids out of DEI, which is ethnic studies and critical race theory and all that.
Got it. Okay, perfect. We'll have to look up. I wasn't aware of that bill, so we'll have to look that up. But I want to thank you for presenting tonight. And next up, we have who's next here? Amy, you are taking us home. You're the last presenter, and you're the last one on my screen. That's how long of a day it's been. Obviously, you're the last presenter. So. Amy, you're going to share some perspective on some success with our friends in Long Beach.
Yes, it's I'm so in awe of all of our speakers, our parents, the amazing students, and these remarkable professionals. And I thank all of our colleagues from all perspectives for showing up tonight. I want to share with you that all is not grim. There are some very bright spots on the horizon. One of these examples comes from the city of Long Beach. I taught in Los Angeles, but I'm going to read for you a statement that was written by somebody in the know who couldn't be here tonight. It says, one of our neighboring districts has been very responsible with meeting the ethnic studies requirement without infusing any bias towards any group of people. They've embedded ethnic studies into their U.S. history course using an inquiry model where each unit includes the struggles and contributions of each ethnic group contributing to the United States, including Jewish Americans and Hindu Americans. Students can choose which groups to learn more about, with a focus on finding commonalities through inquiry into the struggles of each group and stories of overcoming prejudice to find success, which is a wonderful example of how you build grit and durability, endurance in students. Students are encouraged to formulate their own opinions and use their critical thinking skills and are not told what to think. No victimhood, resistance through surviving and thriving. An uplifting way to empower our young generation today and bring our diverse communities together. This person also has shared that the labor union, even that teachers union, has come up with a statement and an agreement that international conflict is not the purview of labor unions in the United States. It's about darn time. It's, all I can tell you is the last several meetings at the university, the last several meetings of United Teachers Los Angeles, they focused on Israel. And they had no contract in place for next school year. But this has been what they, push their laser-like focus onto. But the way of Long Beach is really the wise way forward. And this allows them to make good use of their funds and their expertise and their experience in their labor union for things that labor unions rightly do. So I have great hope for all of us making progress in that direction.
Perfect.
And that's our evening from my perspective.
Perfect. Well, yes. So this actually is our last panel for the evening. And Amy, again, thank you for being the co-host always with me and helping ICANN in this space. We're very grateful for your partnership, and I'm personally thankful for you being a colleague. And I want to say thank you to all the speakers tonight. All of you here in this panel, Larry, Nicole, and Ilana, and everybody, the students especially. Thank you for the bravery of speaking up. I know it's not easy to do that, and some of you are not. You were not even graduated yet. None of them are graduated yet, so they still have to go to school tomorrow. So again, thank you all for speaking out, speaking up. We will send more information about the new ethnic studies bill that is being currently considered by the legislature, and we hope to see some positive developments in that regard. And otherwise, we will keep up the fight to keep our kids and our schools safe throughout the state of California. So again, thank you all for attending this evening, and I will say good night. So good night all.